First of all, Dirk, congratulations to you. This is something that's pretty special.
Thank you. It isn't something I honestly really expected. I was, really surprised when I was nominated, and it's quite an honor, and it's, to me, as big as the honor itself is that the people, that nominated me thought enough for the work I'd done with them to consider me for this, and that, to me, that's what's probably the most special thing about it.
You don't campaign for something like this at all.
Well, I didn't, because like I said, it wasn't anything I ever really even considered, as a possibility. So,
Tell me a little bit about how long you've been farming, how you got started.
got started in 1985. That was my first crop. Graduated from the University of Illinois in 1984, and actually then that first summer I was kind of bopping around looking for something to do till I got going farming, and worked at the Farm Progress Show. That year it was in Dewey, Illinois. Now, that was a really interesting experience. You got to see how the sausage was made, and so went from there to farming and started out. My dad had a small farrow to finish hog operation, and he was getting out of that, and so I fired that back up again and was farming 400 acres, and kind of went from there.
Were you on your own at that time?
My dad and I farmed and did the row crops together. So we had 1,000 acres together, and grew from there. Shared machinery and labor. And
What did you learn from that first year? You think, boy, have I got the right place, or what am I doing here?
Yeah, I've told a lot of people that at the time when because I did a lot of job interviews and was looking at opportunities, banking, business world, and I mean, I had an uncle that was lobbying very hard to get me working for him in the bank, but I just wanted to farm, and everybody's saying, you do not want, this is a terrible time to start. You do not want to do this. And I'm not very bright, I guess. I didn't take anybody's advice and started, and in the end, I always thought, because I had by my second year, corn blew through $2. We were getting $1.50, and you really work to milk $2 to $2.25 out of a bushel of corn. And so that was kind of my learning experience. You literally started at the bottom, but at the same time, you got a lot of lessons that, today I think were very valuable to me.
Those lessons paid off for the next 40 years then.
Well, I think so, and I think, to me, what I learned was you can cut back, you can live on nothing, and, I've heard other, between, bankers and like equipment salesmen and stuff talk about, they get concerned about customers in certain age brackets that started in different times and don't quite understand how to reel things in when things get really tight.
Now, you said you worked with some bankers. You worked with, I'm sure, a lot of commercial seed salesmen. The other folks that are part of agriculture, where do they fit into those decisions that you've made along the line? Have they been pretty valuable over the years?
More important all the time. As the technology on equipment gets more and more to where I don't understand it, they're very helpful. They have to be. You sell me a piece of equipment, you better be willing to ride with me a little bit to show me, what do all these buttons do. Seed technology. We used to totally pick our own seed, but when you found a good hybrid, you'd stay with it 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Now I put a lot on the seed salesman. You better know what you're selling, and you better know what fits my farm best. If you don't do a good job of selecting, then we're probably not going to be doing a lot of business. So it's just things change at such an accelerated pace now that I have to rely on those people way more than I used to for those decisions.
There's a lot of other things that are changing, and I know conservation has changed. You probably didn't grow any cover crops those first few years that you were in farming.
I can remember my dad actually once put out a strip, and I didn't understand, why he was doing this. Now we were no-tilling. We were even before then, we were very minimum till.
Okay.
He was very conservation-minded. I remember him talking about my grandfather thought we should still be letting stuff be fallow, every so many years. Which, and I understood here years later when we started with the cover crops, what we were doing wasn't really anything new. This is how they used to do this. Those years when, you have a fallow year in the rotation, and that's what you're doing was you're using a cover crop to try to regenerate the soil. So, we were just reinventing the wheel.
So that's pretty deep into your roots, is that conservation and regeneration and those types of principles.
Yeah, I mean, I learned, we had one field that had, for Champaign County, a pretty good, what we considered a pretty good hill, and my dad farmed it on the contour. And so I had to learn to cultivate with a Farmall 400 tractor on the contour. Now that's that made it that much more interesting. And so, but I, at the time, people just weren't doing that stuff. I remember we had a chisel plow very, very early 1970s, and that was the first one in the neighborhood. And boy, those first ones were pretty crude and it didn't work very good, but you kind of went on from there and learned. And then, that's just how we were always kind of a little bit ahead of the curve trying new stuff when it came to conservation.
So if you're trying to stay ahead of the curve, what are you trying to stay ahead of right now?
Well, we've worked with, I started fall of 2012 was the first cover crop I seeded. And so we're working with that, and have been for a long time. And even when my son came home, 2016, he became a dealer, because that's, especially kids that go like a junior college route, they were real interested in that at the time he was in school. And he was actually coming out and digging up things that were on my farm and taking them to Parkland. And, so that's, I think, as a teaching tool, I think the junior colleges are real important, in this next generation, getting them to look at this, consider this. As I look around my neighborhood, when I see, I've seen people try and cover crops that I never expected to see, but it's always a case where, well, the kid came home to farm, and it's dad, we got to try that, and so eventually dad caves and, you try some acres and, and then they, maybe keep doing a little more and get a little deeper into it.
This recognition that you're getting, you are one of several here today. You've seen some of your friends and colleagues in the past. Who are some of those that you've kind of look back on and say, he's doing the right things, I'd kind of like to do those right things also?
Well, that's, like I said, growing up around my dad,
Right.
He was very conservation-minded. When I got on the Illinois Corn Marketing Board, I always remembered when you start on that, you don't have a clue what's going on, and they're throwing acronyms and names around it. You don't know what it is. And I always remember Kent Kleinschmidt had been a long time Illinois. He'd been on the Illinois Corn Growers Board at that time. He was coming close to the end of his tenure on the marketing board, and the first 3 meetings or so, he sat down next to me and just tutored me along, what they were talking about, what was going on. And so that really made an impression on me. And so I really tried my years on the board when new people came on to make a point of trying to tell them, here's what we're talking about. Because ag groups love acronyms. I saw a list once of all the acronyms, different organizations we deal with. It was 3 pages long. And and when you haven't heard these, if you don't know the organization they're talking about, you're lost in a conversation. So to me, that's just real important, is helping the next group get up to speed.
What are you hoping that somebody would pick up from you and pass on and be able to either employ themselves on the farm or to pass off to make agriculture a little bit better?
I think there are so few of us, people need to get active. It's still a very small percentage of farmers that are active in farm organizations, and still. And I mean, I've always said it's probably 10% of the farmers. Well, when you're down to 1% of the population, 10% of you, not very much. And I always remembered, and this was Kent. We were at a meeting, a national meeting, and at that point he'd been on different corn boards for 20 years, and he says, half the people here are the same people here when I started. And that bothered him. It bothers me that you're not getting the turnover. You need fresh opinions, you need fresh ideas. When the same people are making the decisions all along, you get kind of stagnant. So that's why it's important for younger people to get involved and, and make that's, one of the sayings I picked up on over the years was the world is run by those who show up. Well, if you don't show up, then you kind of lose your right to complain, when things don't go the way, and you have a lot better understanding of, what is happening. And, for instance, how are these tariffs affecting us? We spend a lot of time as ag groups working on new markets, developing new markets, maintaining existing markets, and then you throw a tariff in and it throws a wrench in, and it's, had nothing to do with us, but, still we're affected tremendously by it. So that's all very frustrating when you see, a decade or more of work undone by, the stroke of a pen.
Several of the things that you just mentioned in the last minute, I have a feeling it kind of sounds like they might be included in your remarks that you make here today.
Well, it could be. I don't know how long I didn't come with anything prepared, and so the way it sounds, I'll be the last speaker, so by then people might be looking to go, so might just try to be brief and go on. But I'm a huge supporter of checkoffs. I mean, I understood those both started in the corn and soybean early years when I was farming, and I recognized right away that, you're taking farmer funds. It's by far the smallest expense of anything I got. It's literally pennies on the dollar. The amount of good it does is just tremendous, and I've been on the other end of it. I've seen, what they do, and by no means, is everything you do a home run. What you're trying to do is string a bunch of singles together, and hopefully get some good results out of that. But it's just so important that we have those. It's just farmers pooling their funds to promote their own agenda. No one else is doing it for us, so that's why it's just a big issue with me.
Some sage advice from Dirk Rice, Philo, and one of the members of the 2025 class of Prairie Farmer Master Farmers. Congratulations once again, sir.
Well, thank you, Steve.